The 10th ray. This consists of detailed descriptions of the contents of the Flashes collection from the 15th to the 30th Flashes, and the rays collection from the 1st to the 9th rays. The 11th ray. A fruit of Denizli prison. This is a defense of the Risale-i Nur against atheism and absolute disbelief. It is our true defense in this imprisonment of ours, for it is only this we are working at. This treatise is a fruit and souvenir of Denizli prison and the product of 2 Fridays. Said Nursi. The fruits of belief. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. And he languished in prison for a number of years more. According to an inner meaning of this verse, Joseph, peace be upon him, is the patron of prisoners, and prison is a sort of school of Joseph. Since this is the second time the Risale-i Nur students have been sent to prison in large numbers, we should study and teach in this school, which has been opened to give this training the brief summaries of a number of matters connected with prison that the Risale-i Nur proves, and to benefit from them truly. We shall explain 5 or 6 of those summaries. The first topic. As is explained in the 4th verse, every day our Creator bestows on us the capital of 24 hours of life, so that with it we may obtain all the things necessary for our 2 lives. If we spend 23 hours on this fleeting worldly life and neglect to spend the remaining 1 hour, which is sufficient for the 5 obligatory prayers, on the very lengthy life of the hereafter, it may be understood what an unreasonable error it is, and what a great loss to suffer distress of the mind and spirit as the penalty for the error, and to behave badly because of the distress, and to fail to rectify one's conduct, due to living in a state of despair, indeed, to do the opposite. We may make the comparison. We should think of what a profitable ordeal it is if we spend the 1 hour on the 5 obligatory prayers, for each hour of this calamitous term of imprisonment sometimes becomes a day's worship, and one of its transcends hours becomes many permanent hours, and our despair and distress of the spirits and heart in part disappears, and is atonement for the mistakes that led to the imprisonment, and is the cause of their being forgiven. We are trained and improved, which is the purpose of imprisonment, so should think of that and its being instruction and a pleasant and consoling meeting with our companions in disaster. As is explained in the 4th verse, it may be understood how contrary it is to a person's interests to give 5 or 10 liras out of his 24 to a lottery in which 1,000 people are taking part in order to win the 1,000 lira prize, and not give a single lira out of the 24 for a ticket for an everlasting treasure of jewels, and to rush to the former and flee from the latter, although the chance of winning the 1,000 liras in the worldly lottery is 1 in 1,000, because there are 1,000 people taking part. However, in the lottery of man's destiny, which looks to the hereafter, the chance of winning for the people of belief, who experience happy deaths, is 999 out of 1,000. This has been taught by 124,000 prophets and confirmed by incalculable numbers of truthful saints and professed scholars as a result of their illuminations. Prison governors and chief warders, and indeed the country's administrators and the guardians of public order, should be grateful at this lesson of the Risale-i Nur, for the governments and disciplining of 1,000 believers who constantly have in mind the prison of hell is far easier than that of 10 unbelievers who do not perform the obligatory prayers, only think of worldly prisons, do not know what is licit and what is illicit, and are in part accustomed to living undisciplined lives. A summary of the second topic. As is well explained in a guide for youth from the Risale-i Nur, it is as definite and obvious that death will befall us as the night will follow today and winter this autumn. Just as this prison is a temporary guest house for those who continuously enter and leave it, so the face of the earth is a hostel on the road of the swiftly traveling caravans, which alight for one night, then pass on. Surely death, which has emptied all the steeds into the graveyard 100 times over, has demands greater than life. The Risale-i Nur has solved this riddle of this awesome truth and discovered its answer. A short summary is this: since death cannot be killed, nor the door of the grave be closed, if there is a way of being saved from the executioner of the appointed hour and the solitary confinements of the grave, it is a question and anxiety for man of greater importance than anything. Yes, there is a solution, and through the mystery of the Qur'an, the Risale-i Nur has brought it as certainly as 2 + 2 = 4. A brief summary of it is as follows. Death is either eternal annihilation, a gallows on which will be hanged both man and all his friends and relations, or it comprises the release papers to depart for another eternal realm and to enter with the documents of bliss the palace of bliss. The grave is either a bottomless pit and dark place of solitary confinements, or it's the door opening from the prison of this world onto an eternal, light-filled garden and place of feasting. A guide for youth has brought this truth with a comparison. For example, gallows have been set up in these prison yards, and behind the wall immediately beyond them a huge lottery office has been opened. The whole world is taking part in the lottery it is holding. We 500 people in this prison are certain to be summoned one by one without exception to that arena. To avoid it is not possible. Everywhere announcements are being made. Come and receive your decree of execution and mount the gallows, or receive your note for everlasting solitary confinement and take that door, or good news for you, the winning ticket worth millions has come up for you. Come and receive it. We see with our own eyes that one after the other they are mounting the gallows. We observe that some are being hanged, while others are making the gallows a step and moving on to the lottery office beyond the wall. Just at that point, which we know as though we have seen it from the certain information given by the high-ranking officials there, 2 groups have entered our prison. One group are holding musical instruments, wine, and apparently sweet confections and pastries, which they are trying to make us eat. But the sweets are in fact lethal, for assassins in human form have laced them with poison. The second group are carrying instructive writings, illicit foods, and blessed drinks. They present them to us and all together say to us with great earnestness, "If you take and eat the gifts the first group gave you by way of testing you, you shall be hanged on this gallows before us like the others you have seen. But if you accept the gifts we have brought you, on the command of this country's ruler, instead of them, and recite the supplications and prayers in the instructive writings, you shall be saved from execution. Believe, as though you were seeing it, that each of you shall receive the winning ticket worth millions in the lottery office as a royal favor. These decrees say, and we ourselves say the same, if you eat those illicit, obvious, and poisonous sweets, you shall suffer terrible pains from the poison until you go to be hanged." Like this comparison, for the people of belief and worship, on condition they have happy deaths, the ticket for an everlasting and inexhaustible treasury will come up from the lottery of man's destiny beyond the gallows of the appointed hour, which we always see. For those who persist in vice, unlawful actions, unbelief, and sin, however, there is 100% probability that on condition they do not repent, they will receive the summons to either eternal annihilation for those who do not believe in the hereafter, or to permanent, dark solitary confinement for those who believe in the immortality of man's spirit but take the way of vice and eternal perdition. Certain news of this has been given by the 124,000 prophets with their innumerable miracles which confirm them and by the more than 124 million saints who see in their illuminations the traces and shadows, as though on a cinema screen, of what the prophets have told and put their signatures to it, affirming it, and by the more than thousands of millions of investigative scholars, interpreters of the law, and veracious ones who with decisive proofs and powerful arguments prove according to reason, and absolutely certainly the things told by those two eminent groups of mankind, and have set their signatures to them. Note: one of those investigative scholars is the Risale-i Nur, which for 20 years has been silencing obstinate philosophers and obdurate atheists. Its various parts are available, everyone may read them, and no one can object to them. The situation then of someone who does not heed the news given unanimously by the degrees of these three vast and elevated communities and groups of the people of reality, who are the suns, moons, and stars of mankind, and the sacred leaders of humanity, and does not take the straight path which they have pointed out, and disregards the awesome 99% danger, and abandons that way due to one person saying there is danger on it, and takes another lengthy way, his situation is as follows. The wretch who, since he has abandoned, according to the certain news of innumerable well-informed observers, the shortest and easiest of the two ways, which with 100% certainly will lead to paradise and eternal happiness, and has chosen the roughest, longest way, which is most fraught with difficulties, and is 99% certain to lead to incarceration in hell and everlasting misery, who leaves the short way because, according to the false information of a single informer, there is a 1% chance of danger and the possibility of a month's imprisonment, and chooses the long way, which is without benefit, just because it holds no danger. Like drunken lunatics, such a wretch has lost his humanity, mind, heart, and spirit to the extent that he ignores the terrible dragons which are seen from afar and are pestering him, and struggles against mosquitoes, attaching importance to them alone. Since this is the reality of the situation, we prisoners should accept the gifts of the second blessed group, so that we avenge ourselves totally for this calamity of prison. That is to say, just as the pleasure of a minute's revenge, or a minute or two, or an hour or two of vice, or this calamity has put us in this prison for 15, 5, 10, or 2, or 3 years, and made our worlds into a prison, so, to spite it, we should avenge ourselves on this calamity by transforming an hour or two of our prison lives into a day or two of worship, an hour 2 or 3 years sentences through the gifts of the blessed group into 20 or 30 years of permanent life, and our prison sentences of 20 or 30 years into a means of being released from millions of years of incarceration in the dungeons of hell. In the face of our transitory worlds weeping, we should make our everlasting lives smile. We should show that prison is a place of training and education, and each of us try to be well-behaved, reliable, useful members of our nation and country. The prison officers, administrators, and governors should see that the men they suppose to be criminals, bandits, layabouts, murderers, depraved, and harmful to the country are students studying in this blessed place of instruction, and should proudly offer thanks to God. The third topic. This is a summary of an instructive incident which is described in a guide for youth. One time, I was sitting by my window in Eskişehir prison during the Republic Festival. Opposite me, the older girls of the high school were laughing and dancing in the schoolyard. Suddenly, their condition 50 years hence appeared to me as though on a cinema screen. I saw that of those 50 to 60 girl students, 40 to 50 had become earth in their graves and were suffering torments, while 10 were ugly 70 to 80-year-olds who were despised where they might have expected love because they did not preserve their chastity when young. This I observed with complete certainty, and I wept at their pitiable states. Some of my friends in the prison heard my weeping and came and asked me about it. I told them, "Leave me alone, for now I want to be alone." Yes, what I saw was reality, not imagination. Just as the summer and autumn are followed by winter, so the summer of youth and autumn of old age are followed by the winter of the grave and intermediate realm. If there were a cinema which showed the events of 50 years in the future, the same as those of 50 years ago are shown in the present, and the people of misguidance and vice were to be shown their circumstances of 50 or 60 years hence, they would weep in horror and disgust at their unlawful pleasures and those things at which they now love. When preoccupied with these observations in Eskişehir prison, a collective personality which spreads vice and misguidance was embodied before me like a human Satan. It said, "We want to experience all the pleasures and joys of life, and to make others experience them, don't interfere with us." I replied, "Since you do not recall death and plunge yourself into vice and misguidance for pleasure and enjoyment, you should certainly know that due to your misguidance, all the past is dead and non-existent. It's a desolate graveyard full of rotted bodies. The suffering arising from those innumerable separations and the eternal deaths of those numberless friends inflicted on your head through the concern of your humanity and your misguidance, and on your heart if you have one, and it is not death, will soon destroy your insignificant drunken pleasure of the present. The future too, due to your unbelief, is a non-existent, black, dead, and desolate wasteland. And since the heads of the unfortunates who appear from there, sticking them out into existence while stopping by in the present, are struck off by the executioner's sword of the appointed hour and thrown into non-existence, it continuously rains down grievous worries on your unbelieving heads due to the concern of your intellect, completely overturning your petty, dissolute pleasure. If you give up vice and misguidance and enter the sphere of certain affirmative belief and righteousness, you will see through the light of belief that the past is not non-existent and a graveyard that rots everything, but an existent, light-filled world which is transformed into the future and into a waiting room for the immortal spirits who will enter palaces of bliss in the future. Since it appears thus, it affords not pain, but according to the strength of belief, a sort of paradisical pleasure. The future, too, appears to the eye of belief not as a dark wasteland, but where banquets and exhibitions of gifts have been set up in palaces of everlasting bliss by the most merciful and compassionate one of glory and bestowal, whose mercy and munificence are infinite, and who makes the spring and summer into tables laden with bounties. Since the person observes this on the cinema screen of belief, he knows he will be dispatched there. He may experience the pleasures of the eternal realm. All may do this according to their degree. That is to say, true, pain-free pleasure is found only in belief in God and is possible only through faith. Since it is related to our discussion, we shall explain here by means of a comparison that is included in a guide for youth as a footnote, one single benefit and pleasure out of the thousands that belief produces in this world too. It is as follows. For example, your beloved's only child is suffering the pangs of death, and you are thinking despairingly that you will be eternally parted from him, when suddenly a doctor like Hızır or Lokman the Wise arrives with a wondrous medicine. Your lovely, lovable child opens his eyes, delivered from death. You can understand what joy and happiness it would give you. Now, like the child, millions of people whom you earnestly love and are concerned for are, in your view, rotting in the graveyards of the past and are about to be annihilated when suddenly the reality of belief, like Lokman the Wise, shines a light from the window of heart onto the graveyard, which is imagined to be a vast place of execution. Through it, all the dead spring to life. On their declaring through the tongue of disposition, "We did not die, and shall not die, we shall meet with you again," you feel an endless joy which belief gives in this world too. This proves that belief in God is a seed that if embodied would give rise to a private paradise, becoming the tuba tree of that seed. I told the collective personality this, but in its stubbornness it said, "At least we can live like animals, passing our lives in pleasure and enjoyment, and indulging in amusement and dissipation, and not thinking about these difficult matters." I told it by way of an answer, "You cannot be like an animal, for animals have no past and future. They feel neither sorrows or regrets at the past, nor anxiety and fear at the future. An animal experiences perfect pleasure, it sleeps and rises and thanks its creator. One held down to be slaughtered even does not feel anything. It wants to feel it as the knife cuts, but that feeling disappears as well, and it is saved from the pain. This means that the unseen not being made known and the things that will befall us being veiled is a great instance of divine mercy and compassion. This is more complete for innocent animals. But, oh man, your past and future emerge from the unseen to an extent because of your reason, so you are entirely deprived of the animal's lack of concern due to the unseen being concealed from them. The regrets and painful separations coming from the past and the anxieties coming from the future reduce to nothing your insignificant pleasure. They make it 100 times less than that which the animals receive. Since the reality is this, either throw away your intellect and become an animal and be saved, or come to your senses through belief, listen to the Qur'an, and receive pure pleasure 100 times greater than that of the animals in this transitory world too. Saying this, I silenced it. But that abdurate collective personality still turned to me and said, "At least we can live like those Westerners who are without religion." I replied, "You cannot be like the irreligious people of Europe either. For even if they deny one prophet, they can believe in the others. If they do not know the prophets, they may believe in God. And even if they do not know God, they may possess personal qualities by virtue of which they find fulfillment. But if a Muslim denies the prophet of the end of time, peace and blessings be upon him, who was the final and greatest of the prophets, and whose religion and cause are universal, and if he abandons his religion, he will accept no other prophet, and perhaps not even God. For he knows all the prophets, and God, and all perfections through the prophets of the end of time, peace and blessings be upon him. The others can have no place in his heart without him. It is for this reason that since early times people have entered Islam from all other religions, but no Muslim has become a true Jew, Messian, or Christian. Muslims who abandon their religion become irreligious, their characters are corrupted, and they become harmful for the country and nation. I proved this, and the obstinate collective personality could find no further straw to clutch at, so it vanished and went to hell. My friends who are studying together with me in the school of Joseph, since the reality is this, and the Risale-i Nur proves it as clearly and decisively as sunlight, for 20 years it has broken the obstinacy of the aberrates and induced them to believe. We should therefore follow the way of belief and right conduct, which is easy and safe and beneficial for both our own worlds and our futures and our lives in the hereafter and our country and nation, and spend our free time reciting the surahs of the Qur'an that we know instead of indulging in distressing fancies, and learn the meaning from friends who teach them, and make up for the prayers we have failed to perform in the past, when we should have done, and taking advantage of one another's good qualities, transform this prison into a blessed garden, raising the seedlings of good character. With good deeds like this, we should do our best to make the prison governor and those concerned not torturers like the angels of hell, standing over criminals and murderers, but righteous masters and kindly guards, charged with the duties of raising people for paradise in the school of Joseph and supervising their training and education.